What's up, everybody? Welcome to State of the Nation, the Athletics Raiders podcast. I'm Jimmy Durkin, joined by Vic Schaefer. We're fresh out of our 30-minute viewing window of the Raiders minicamp, their first rookie minicamp here. And Vic, let's talk about this Raiders rookie class and any impressions immediately from that half hour. I know you're tweeting out some videos and you're getting some reviews on Mo Hurst's first step.
Very explosive. You
Very
can tell
explosive.
From the first second, he's special. Now, obviously, everyone's excited about the new guys. I think we saw him work out with the coaches, kind of get their stances down. It's very basic instructional stuff, kind of very fundamental stuff right now. But he looks quick. Obviously, and Arden Key looks like Alden Smith a little bit. Looks the same kind.
Wearing 99.
Wearing 99, same kind of build. So see how that goes. But yeah, everyone here is excited about the draft class so far.
All right, well, let's kind of get into that draft class. Obviously, last week, our last episode, we had just talked about that first pick. Obviously, Kolton Miller, their first rounder. So we kind of got into him last week. So let's start with round two. And the Raiders went for a small school guy, P.J. Hall, defensive tackle out of Sam Houston State. They traded down into that second round to go ahead and grab him. Your immediate impressions on him. I mean, he's a guy that very strong. You saw that video of him squatting 700 pounds. So he's a guy that they're going to count on to help bring that interior push. John Gruden's talked about they needed it. Jack Del Rio talked about it. For a couple years that they needed it. Is he a guy that can bring it?
Yeah, obviously look at his tape. It stood out in the small schools he played against. Definitely, I think it was a numbers guy. Look at his squat. You mentioned his squat. Pretty quick for a guy his size. Not very short, not very tall, but just in terms of the raw projection, I like what he can do. Obviously, we have no idea what a guy does when he jumps levels, but I think some people thought it was kind of a reach at the second round, but my other thing is if you like a guy and you want a guy, why gamble? He's going to be there in the third round if you just take the guy when you want him. So a lot of these picks are kind of quote-unquote reaches or guys may have upside versus not having the great value where they were picked. But if you succeed, if you hit on a couple of them, then you hit a home run. So I just think they took some risk is too strong a word, but they took some leaps of faith on some of these guys. I think he's one of them.
Yeah, and that was part of a very active day, too, for them. They obviously, we mentioned, traded down, picked up an extra third-rounder. They did a lot of moving around with all these picks. Very busy. I think they came into the draft, I believe, with 11 picks, and then they added 2, of course, with Kolton Miller. And then by the time it was all said and done, they ended up with 9 draft picks because they were very active with moving around. And I'm sure for Reggie that was a little bit kind of out of his comfort zone. When he feels like when he comes into a draft with 11 picks, if this was a draft, one of the old drafts that he was running, he's probably taking 11 guys.
Or 15.
Yeah, 15.
He's trade down for 5 7th rounders.
When he's up to 13, he's like, I'm adding 13 guys. Yeah. To me, I don't ever have a problem with adding all these picks and then using them to be aggressive and jump up and get guys, and that's kind of what their strategy was. It's where they went from at one point 13 picks down to 9.
Yeah, I think in John Gruden's mind, you sign all these veterans. Sometimes all the fans think they're too old, but whatever. A lot of guys who've been around the league for a long time have something to prove. These guys are going to compete against young guys on the team from last year, plus all these guys you drafted. So they have 6 undrafted guys they signed today. So it's all about competition. I think Gruden wants to shake things up. Give his fiery speech, see who kind of responds to it and kind of can learn this new system that they have in place. And, the best guys standing will make the roster. And then if you're a veteran or a young guy and if you don't measure up, then you'll be gone. So I think it's, in that regard, it's kind of healthy, I think.
So P.J. Hall was a guy that they traded down, adding a pick to get. And then their next pick in the third round, Brandon Parker, a guy that they give up a couple late-round picks and swap their third round to move up and take another small school guy. And then that's when you're the fans, you just start looking at the name of the school, where the guy's from. A 6'7", 310-pound tackle out of North Carolina A&T, a guy you had identified in your day 2 preview piece as a guy you thought they might be looking to target there in that third round.
Yeah, he's kind of similar to Kolton Miller. Kind of he's a long guy. He's got good feet. Maybe not to the weight you want. Now he has to kind of definitely get a little bigger. But to me, it's kind of like they kind of doubled down. We took I won't say Miller's a risk, but there's a question mark if he's really a top 15 guy. But they think he is. They like his upside, as John said. And I think this guy's kind of similar. So you kind of take 2 shots at getting a future left tackle. The worst case scenario, one guy plays right side, and that's also fine. They have a need there. So I think that obviously the Raiders had a big need at tackle. They went into this draft saying, hey, we're going to get 2. And I'm a little surprised they took 2 in the first 3 rounds, but again, they like Parker, and I think they have faith in Tom Cable that he can kind of bring the best out of these guys. So I think right now, a lot of the pressure's on Tom Cable.
Well, and if you want starting caliber tackles, that's probably what you need to do, right? We've talked last week about how this wasn't a very good tackle class. So if you're going into it saying we need at least 1 starter and maybe probably 2, that's what you need to do. You need to go early and often after these guys. And so they get them early. They get 2 guys early. If they really do become their starting left tackle, their starting right tackle, their bookend tackles for the next 4 years, then suddenly it's a good decision because we know that they've invested a lot of money into that interior, somewhere they may have to trim at some point, but they put so much money into Hudson, Assembly, and Jackson that if they can get 2 cheap tackles for the next 4 or 5 years, it's important.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're a skeptic, you would say, do you really want to draft 2 tackles in the first 3 rounds of a year? Everyone says it's a down year for tackles. It's a bad year for tackles. You really want to take 2 guys in the first 3 rounds when there's a lot of defensive guys who can help you right away, especially on this team. This team needs defensive help. But, again, they have a lot of faith in Tom and Cable and what he can do with these guys. I'm sure I know he loved Miller. I haven't talked to anyone about his thoughts on Parker, but I know he really wanted Miller, even over McGlinchey. So I think he's excited about that pick. So I think you're telling Tom, look, this is your guy. We need him to start one spot or the other by opening day. So do what you got to do. And ideally, it's left tackle. If not, we'll use Donald there for a year and have this guy start at right tackle. But I think for this draft to be an immediate success, Kolton Miller's got to be in the lineup on day 1.
Yeah, you talk about the faith in Tom Cable, and I think that's one question people are asking: should there be that faith? You look at Seattle; they've struggled on the offensive line the last few years. Maybe he hasn't been able to develop guys up there. How do you view Cable? Is he a guy that you should expect is still a top flight offensive line coach that's going to be able to get these guys ready?
I think I have no idea. I think, being honest, I think you mentioned Seattle, and it goes both ways. Like, there's you didn't have anything to work with, but then if you are a great
guy that's going to develop,
then develop somebody. So I agree his record in Seattle was not the best, but I know that Gruden really thinks highly of him. I know a lot of guys in the league do. So I think he's done better in the past with veteran guys than young guys. I know when he was here way back when, he had the Bruce Campbell project. That didn't go very well. So I think that wasn't his guy, though. That was Al Davis' pick, and Al thought, hey, here's a big piece of clay, mold it, and he couldn't do it. But I just think that these are guys clearly he wants. Clearly he's targeted these guys. So I think all the question marks, the Tom Cable jury can come to a verdict the next year or so. If these guys pan out, then he is a good offensive line coach and knows what he's doing. If not, then they obviously made a couple big mistakes here.
Well, the most interesting pick, I think, on day 2 was their second third rounder, and that's LSU defensive end Arden Key, a guy who, talent-wise, if you were to strip away everything and you go back to what can this guy do on the field? Can he rush the passer? You look at his sophomore year at LSU where he had 12 sacks, and then he goes to marijuana rehab, checks himself in, has weight issues last year, and obviously drops off the board for a lot of reasons. And if the Raiders can get that guy that was, a menace in the SEC as a sophomore, it's a great third-round pick. If not, who knows, right?
Definitely seems to be, again, back to that word risk. I think there's definitely a lot more risk here. I think third round might be a little high for a guy with that downside, and obviously they love the upside. But, I just think that pass rushers are rare, so you got to roll the dice. But there's a lot of baggers there, so I think people would think if a fourth-round pick might be a little more comfortable. The third round's a little dicey. You should, again, get a guy you're pretty sure can be a guy who can play for you sometime pretty soon. So, but he said all the right things. They believe in him. They think the structure here is good for him to come in and learn from some of the veteran guys. He's saying all the right things. And obviously, everyone's young. Everyone does things that are dumb at some point in their lives, and you'll hopefully learn from those mistakes. I think the question mark with the NFL is you're not giving these guys a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so now these guys who had bad habits in college, now those things get magnified even more. You can get a lot more trouble with money than you can without money, I think. Yeah. So, but we'll see. I think they had a need, and they hopefully can come in and at least help them get the quarterback once in a while this year.
And obviously he was another guy that they traded up for. They gave up one of their seventh-round picks to come up and get him. And that's kind of a situation, I think, when teams are sitting there kind of mid-late third round, and the fourth round, it's not just rolling around. You got to wait till tomorrow morning. If you have a guy that you really like, and clearly they really wanted to get him, I mean, going up and trading up to get him, you probably don't want to wait, I guess, till the next day. You want to just get that guy and be able to go to sleep knowing that guy that you wanted is now on your team.
Yeah, I know in the conference call with us, Key said that his talk with Lamont Winston, who works here in the staff of the Raiders, deals with players a lot in terms of like stuff off the field and kind of helps them get them their finances right and all kinds of all things you don't think of in terms of
like he was the one lifeline for Alden Smith during his suspension that he was able to deal with him.
So I guess the talk went really well. I think both for Key and for Lamont, and obviously gave a thumbs up. So they're comfortable that he can come in here and do the right things and be the guy they need him to be at the third-round pick.
All right, moving on to day 3. Nick Nelson, a cornerback out of Wisconsin. He obviously is not out there participating in rookie minicamp. He tore up his meniscus during a private workout leading up to the draft, so they're not going to be able to see him for a while. So it's going to take some time before we can get any impressions on Nick Nelson.
Yeah, I just think they needed a cornerback. They want a guy to compete at some point. Obviously, he had the knee injury recently, but he had some nice measurables and did a good job in coverage. Didn't have any picks in college. It's always a kind of an eye raiser, but yeah, fourth round, and cornerbacks, it's hard to hit on cornerbacks in the NFL. So I think you just take a shot, and if it happens, it's great. If not, then oh well.
We'll get to see if this staff is better about teaching these guys how to catch, because they could nobody could catch an interception last year. I mean, that was the most remarkable thing. How many games did they go last year without having a pick? Was it 12, 13?
I think it was 11 or 12. It was a lot.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal when they got one. So a lot of that's luck, but obviously a lot of it's also if guys don't make plays on the ball, then you're also going to have a hard time. But so I mean, I think he's got. I keep going with that word upside. There's upside there. Obviously, if he was healthy, he probably would have gone earlier than the fourth round a little bit, about a third-round pick, I think. So you got a little value, and then whenever he's ready, you throw him in the mix. They got a lot of guys at cornerback. They have a lot of cornerbacks. So it's kind of like just a battle royale. Throw them all in the cage, and the 5 guys who walk out get a job, and the other guys can go home.
I mean, then we've got to move on, of course, to the pick that I think had Raider fans rejoicing. Mo Hurst, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, a guy who, I mean, if you look at some of the mocks before the heart issue comes out, I mean, he was a guy people were mocking to the Raiders at 10. And, I mean, I think even after the heart issue, some people were still, get him in the first round, get him in the second round. They end up getting him in the 5th, which, if he is able to be on the field, and obviously the Raiders have talked about that, it's basically going to be a year-to-year thing. We'll get into some of the talk of what irresponsible about how that pick is, but Mo Hurst, the player, if they have Mo Hurst, the guy who dominated at Michigan, as a 5th rounder on the kind of money a 5th rounder makes, I mean that could end up being their best pick of the draft if he is. If he's a guy that can be able to stay out there on the field. No doubt. And not only was he a playmaker in college, but he's actually a good fit for Paul Guenther's system, kind of like Geno Atkins kind of role with the Bengals. So I think you mentioned it, first-round talent. And I think if you get a first-round talent in the 5th round and he can play, you've hit a home run. But obviously, that's not the whole story. 139 picks before he got picked. The Raiders passed on him 5 times. So I know they're excited to get him. But obviously at some point there was hesitation. There was definitely a question mark, even in their minds. They won't say it now, but obviously in the 4th round, let's say 4th round, you're taking a cornerback who blew out his got a knee injury 3 weeks ago over a guy who was a first-round talent. So to me right there it says, okay, if you're not even going to take him in the 4th round, then you don't want him that badly. You're you still have if somebody else grabs him, we'll say, oh, we liked him.
Exactly.
And you'll be able to go back later when he's a great player. Oh, we really liked him. We were going to take him here.
Right. Otherwise, you wake up for breakfast on day 3 before the draft starts. You're like, okay, this guy's still there. He can be MP. He fits our system. He's everything, first-round talent, all that stuff that we'll get him in the 4th round. To me, it's a no-brainer. So when you pass him in the 4th round, then there's definitely an issue in your mind. Like, we're not positive this guy is going to be a player for us for a long time. We're not sure what's going to happen. I mean, no one really knows. Like, he's not going to release his medical records. He says he's fine and he's ready to go. They say the same thing. But obviously a lot of teams had him in for workouts and checked him out and passed on him. There was one report he had like a fattening of the heart and an irregular heartbeat. So there's so many things we're kind of guessing at what it is, which I don't want to do that. But I mean, obviously everyone wants the best for him. Everyone wants him to be healthy and contribute. He wants to play. So, again, like you said, if he can play and he's an impact guy, then it was by far the best pick of the whole draft, probably.
What do you make of that talk that the Raiders were irresponsible for drafting him? I mean, he, based on all the reports, I mean, there were doctors, at Harvard that cleared him to play. I mean, all these teams had medical personnel evaluate him, and certainly there are medical personnel out there that wouldn't recommend him.
Right.
But there were teams. I mean, we don't know how many that were willing to draft him, but there were some. Do you buy any of that irresponsibility, or if you've got a doctor that tells you he can play, and you're looking at a top 10, top 15 talent, I mean, you're going to take him.
Yeah, and part of that kind of stuff, those reports are all about, I don't want to say clickbait, but it's a part about you have to have stories after the draft.
Yeah.
Teams who pass on have to explain why they pass on. Like, hey, why did you pass on Maurice Hurst? Well, because it's a risk and that's irresponsible. People throw out stuff and you run with it. But obviously, I think Reggie himself said after the draft, like, there are guys who are totally off your board, and there are guys who fall down your board because of health reasons. And at some point, you got to say, okay, how far is he going to fall before we think it's a good risk or a good bet to take him? And for them, clearly it was the 5th round. And so I think irresponsible, no. But obviously it's a risk. The Raiders aren't going to say it's a risk, but it obviously is. And, again, I mean, he loves football. Obviously he wants to play. He was upset about getting thrown out of the combine for not passing his physical, and obviously had a hard time watching the first couple of days of the draft. So I think everyone's rooting for him. Everyone wants to see him do well. Obviously the Raiders do. So that's going to be definitely one of the bigger stories we follow as the offseason goes into the season.
Well, the other 5th round pick, they got Marquette King's replacement, a big leg out of Florida, Johnny Townsend, went right after the Packers jumped up and took J.K. Scott. They need to add a punter, and I mean, you might as well go and draft one, right? I mean, if you can bring in a guy that is going to be really good. I mean, obviously, punter's a spot where you see a lot of teams, just go and get an undrafted guy, and that's the route that they went with kicker, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But impressions of Johnny Townsend and what he's going to bring as Marquette King's replacement. I do love this quote that you had from him in our draft capsules. I'm the type of guy to just kick the ball and run off the field. I wonder who that's kind of comparing himself to.
Well, he said he knows Marquette. I think all these punters know each other. They all hang out, and Marquette goes to all the camps. So I know he knows Marquette well. So I think he knew what he was coming into. He knew why Marquette was let go and knew all the – so that was a good thing to say. I just think he's a football guy. I think he knows his role. I mean, I hate to say that about punters, but know your role. You just kick the ball and
we just dealt with the one punter who in the history of the league who didn't.
Exactly. I don't want to see you singing on Instagram or making videos with Aqib Talib. So I think he's obviously a good, very good SEC punter. Which, like you said, if you can draft a top 3 punter in the country, you do it. You don't take a chance at free agency. I think it looks like he'll be the guy. I don't see any reason why he won't be. Reggie mentioned he's good at situational stuff and directional kicking. He knows what he's doing, so I think he's well schooled in that. I just think it seems like it's a nice way to kind of fill that spot and move on.
All right, the last 2 picks we'll address quickly. The 6th rounder, Azim Victor, a linebacker out of Washington, a guy who special teamer, right?
Yeah, obviously he also had some issues off the field, but at that point you're looking for athletes who might be able to flash and kind of make a jump more than you thought they could. So I think best case scenario, he makes some plays special teams, and maybe he's a guy to look at as having a future role, but at that point it's just a crapshoot. Yeah.
And then the 7th rounder, Marcel Aitman, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma State. He's 6'4", he's 220. But he ran a 4.62 40, so a big guy, maybe a red zone target if he can make the team.
He's a big dude. He had some numbers at Oklahoma State. Obviously, they threw the ball every freaking down pretty much. So at that point, why not? And again, it's just like you take a shot on a guy, and obviously, I think I'm sure the scouts like he's too slow, but he made some catches in the end zone, so you give him a shot. There's somebody again, like we mentioned, cornerback. There's a lot of receivers on this roster right now, so. A lot of chance to compete. I don't think his odds are great, but if you make some plays and you never you'll be the next John Kreiner, who knows? But we'll see.
Yep. We're not going to get into all the undrafted guys, but we will talk about the kicker Eddie Pinheiro. We saw the video that he tweeted out a while back, an 81-yard field goal. Now, I mean, it's off a tee. That's no pass rush, no rush. But
I love it. Yeah, the Twitter reaction. The wind was blowing. It's off a tee. I'm like, dude, it's 81. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be. It's 81 yards. I don't care what. It's still pretty impressive. I think he had a really good record in college. Made a lot of his kicks. I think it was 5 of 5 on kicks over 50 yards, which is pretty good. He thought he was going to get drafted. He left school early thinking he was going to get drafted. So he definitely. I think Giorgio might be in trouble.
Yeah.
DeVecchio might have some serious competition, though, especially when you realize they signed his holder in college, Johnny Townsend, is right there. So, and like we talked about earlier about the whole lefty-righty thing, like Giorgio's a lefty, and this guy's a righty, which Townsend's held for righties, his whole life. So, I think Giorgio may have had a little of a rough moment there when he saw the signings this week.
Hey, it was a fun story. At least, if nothing else, he got his year. He got his couple moments in the sun. I mean, it was one of the more enjoyable stories of the year, at least.
Yeah, I mean, Giorgio's a fighter. I mean, he's definitely going to compete, but obviously, I think they're looking at this guy as definitely giving him more than a run for his money, I think.
All right. Well, the Raiders, they didn't really add to the linebacker position in the draft, but they did on Friday, signing 35-year-old Derek Johnson, and the former Chief, former Pro Bowler, but a guy who is 35.
Going to be 36 in November. So
I got to stop here.
Stop.
A guy who's 35 is turning 36 in November. That's the exact same as me. He's not old. Come on.
Yeah, well, obviously, old is different than
I didn't appreciate all the Twitter jokes about he's got to go get his Centrum Silver and hey man, same age as me. Come on, lay off the guy.
Yesterday, when he mentioned he was in for a visit, Raider fans like, he's terrible, he's old, get out the walker, and he signs it. Okay, you know what? He's got some leadership. He could be a guy. People are like bad mouthing.
He's suddenly a Raider now.
All of a sudden, it's kind of changed. I like this pick. We got some value. It's just But you know what? Bottom line, he was good. I'm sure he still is good in certain situations. He may not be as able to run as fast as he once did, but always been a good cover guy. I think the big thing that I'm sure Gruden loves, he's definitely A-plus type leader type. A voice in the locker room everywhere he's been. Well, obviously everywhere he's been with the Chiefs for 13 years, but he's been a guy there. He's been a locker room presence for 13 years. Will come in, help shape some of these young guys. And ideally he can play enough where he can be the guy there. If not, then it didn't cost. I can't imagine it cost him very much. I mean, I'm sure they offer him less than what they're offering Navarro Bowman. So I think that door closes for Bo, and Derek Johnson could be better. I mean, I don't think Bowman was that great last year. They was solid last year. I was not the cover guy that Johnson could be for them. So they may have actually upgraded for less money. Who knows?
If nothing else, it now eliminates. You don't have to answer 5 questions a day about what's going on with Navarro Bowman. You might still get some questions, though.
I don't know if Bowman was hiring people on Twitter that, but it was. I mean, it's got to be the most guys I've been asked about in my life, doing my life, my 10 years doing this. But every day, I answered the question. I try to answer it every once in a while, but even when I answered it, hey man, I missed your tweet an hour ago. What happened? What's new with Bowman? Update. What's going on with Bowman? I'm nothing.
He's sitting at home waiting for somebody to call, and nobody's calling.
Nothing's changed. You got an offer, he didn't like it, and he's hoping to get another one, and then didn't come. Those are the reports. He may have visited the Giants on Monday. Those weren't true, so I think he's still waiting. And at this point, I think his best bet is actually training camp. The team has an injury. I'm sure they look at every team has a list of the guys available in the market, and I'm sure if you punch up inside linebackers in August, his name will be top of the list, and that might work out for him. So I think at this point, I don't know why he would sign anywhere now. I think you just wait till camp, and hopefully someone gets hurt.
Yep. One I guess side effect somewhat of the Derek Johnson signing is Corey James waived with a failed physical. Surprising there to see Corey James, a guy who Reggie McKenzie was a big fan of. Yeah,
I'm sure around the league, I'm sure that's hardly a blip, but I was surprised. I mean, to all the young guys on his roster the last 2 or 3 years, he actually made some plays once in a while. I actually thought he had some upside and actually had some potential, a guy who might do well working with Derek Johnson, learn some of the tricks of the trade, a good athlete, kind of a downhill guy. It wasn't great, but I thought Corey James showed me something, so I was definitely surprised. But obviously, like you mentioned, there's a Reggie guy, and Reggie's not in charge anymore. Being a Reggie guy is not enough. You got to be a Reggie and a John guy. So obviously, John and Gunther saw enough on tape last year, and they're like, you know what, this guy's not really going to do well in our system, or we can do better than this guy. Maybe Nicholas Morrow makes more sense, or even Markel Lee on running down. So I was surprised, but obviously, I mean, it's all about the new staff and who they like, not what the old guys like.
Another piece of news from this week, Vidal Alexander suspended for the first 4 games of the 2018 season for violating the league's policy on performance-enhancing drugs. As a guy who's going to be coming in, with them adding some offensive linemen and basically everybody that's on that line needing to impress to to impress Tom Cable. I mean, Cable comes in and
I think he was trying to impress him, trying to get bigger. Like, hey, Tom, look at me, I'm big, I'm huge, I can do all this stuff. Maybe it's not a funny joke, but yeah, obviously he did something they shouldn't have done, and I think he was trying to make a good impression. But he's in a tough spot. Obviously, I think it was a tough spot before this, but now it's even tougher to make the roster. I think they have their own ideas, what guys they like. I know they came into the mini camps and they watched what they had in terms of the backup linemen from last year, and they didn't like them. They weren't very happy with what they had. So I think that obviously Donald Penn's 35. Everyone keeps going back to Donald, but I think the fact that the other guys on the roster, the backups last year, the Vidals, the Kirklands, the Sharps, they didn't make a great impression on the new staff, and that's why they drafted 2 tackles in the first 3 rounds. So I think there wasn't really a sense that, hey, we can always plug in Vidal or Denver at right tackle. I think that was not really a thought much after they saw what they saw at minicamp.
Yep, that's puts him in a tough position, and really where it really puts him in a tough position is now that maybe you cut him at some point during training camp before. Now, well, you don't have to cut him if you don't want to because he's suspended those first 4 games. So instead of him being a guy that can just get cut and then maybe get picked up somewhere else, if he's held on to for that first month, just you say, okay, if we have a couple injuries and we need a guy, then he gets active, like the Marcel Reese of a couple years ago, gets activated and then cut, and it becomes harder for him to try to catch on somewhere. So I think that's probably the effect where it really hurts him is that, instead of being cut at some point in the offseason with a chance to catch on with somebody else, he may end up not being on the open market until October.
Yeah, no doubt. It's not good for him either. It's not good for anybody.
All right, well, we've been talking about all these draft picks. Now, Dick, want to go talk to one?
Yeah.
Let's do it. We're going to head out and we're going to talk with first-round pick, Kolton Miller. All right, well, as promised, we're out here with Kolton Miller, the Raiders' first-round pick. And Kolton, you get drafted last week, 8 days ago now. And just what's this whole first week been like? Just the whirlwind of being in Dallas and then coming here to Alameda for the press conference last Friday and just kind of getting set to really begin your career.
It's been good. Finally getting ready to work. First day working out here in Oakland, really love it. How individual was set up. It was really productive working with Coach Cable. I feel like with this sort of system, you can really benefit a lot quickly, which I really enjoy. And I'm looking to compete with these guys, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yesterday, was there a point where it kind of hit you, like driving in past the stadium, or you me trying your helmet on? Tell me through yesterday's process, what was that like?
Yeah, so last week, after I got in at the draft, of course, I was here at the facility, met the coaches, got fitted for my helmet. So being back here, getting ready to work, having this first rookie minicamp practice, it's really cool, man. I mean, I can't emphasize that as much as I can, but it's really great. I'm having a great time being here, and this is the process that I've been waiting for.
Kind of like a dream your whole life, pretty much. Something you've been thinking about.
Yeah. The draft was fun, but I'm ready to work right now.
The combine's something that I think there's kind of a debate of what the value of it is. You listen to a guy like Reggie McKenzie says, no, we drafted Kolton because we watched his tape and we love his tape. And I think, some players maybe, if they have a bad combine, they kind of dismiss it. Obviously, the combine was a place for a lot of people where your name kind of jumped out. You had a big performance back there. Was the combine something you went into, training for it, getting ready for it? Were you really focused on you wanted to have a big performance because you knew that could make a big impact?
Of course. I mean, with everything you do, you compete. I saw the combine as a way to compete and show off my athletic performance. I think the combine more reassured things that to get involved in on tape. I think it began the process earlier for coaches. They're saying, okay, this guy can really move. So I think it just sped up the process. Got coaches looking at tape. But yeah, I trained at Exos in Arizona for this for 8 weeks before the combine, just to get ready for the drills and have your best shot at it. But yeah, I think it definitely helped.
Let's break down this broad jump. So 10 feet 1 inch. You always been a good jumper, or something you surprised yourself, or tell me about this jumping ability you have.
Yeah, I think the last record was 9:10. I looked that up. It was something like 2002 or something like that. And I've been a pretty good moderate jumper when I got into UCLA. They kind of tested you. It's only you get tested like once or twice a year, and I was pretty good at it, but hitting 10 feet, then 10-1, in training, I was like, whoa, I'm about to break a record, which is, that's really cool because it shows hip explosion and being able to sit down and not false step or like fall down when you jump that far. So, it was really exciting when I hit that.
What's the key? What's the secret to a good broad jump? What's the key thing in your mind you got to do to really launch yourself?
So you want to try to throw out your hips. When you jump, you really want to get your hips through, and then once you do that, you want to try to land and sit on your heels when you land. Yeah.
I'm going to work on that. Cool.
Talk to us about the decision to come to the NFL draft. You leave school a year early. Was that an easy decision? What kind of feedback did you get, and what kind of helped you ultimately make that decision that, I'm going to make the jump, and obviously it works out for you when you're a top 15 pick?
Yeah, so that thought kind of got in my head, leaving for the NFL or thinking about the NFL the 2016 year. I would say, the Texas A&M game, and then unfortunately the season or events happened, and I left the next year. I didn't like where I started the first two games, but I think that's coming off of an injury and being on the right side. I think you just tweak some things, which is what I did, and I improved greatly throughout the season, and I'm still looking to improve, and I'm really looking forward to what's ahead.
Your old O-line coach, Hank Fraley, said he thought you played with more physicality last year in terms of the running game, passing game. Do you agree with that? And what triggered that change, you think?
Yeah, well, I would say I was pretty productive the 2016 year because there's just more runs right in my side, and I think that's where most of the big gains happened was behind me. But in terms of short yardage, goal line, straining in the pocket, I think finishing was really important there, and it's going to be. I think that's why you emphasize it so much, is because in the NFL you have to strain and you have to finish. It's a huge deal because that's what separates good and great players, trying to outstrain your opponent. So, he made a big point on that, and I think I did fairly well. Yeah.
And when you look at your game, what do you think are your biggest strengths that are going to translate well to the NFL? What do you go into this first mini camp and then your first training camp and your first season saying, I know I need to work on that. I know that these are areas that have to get better for me to be able to be a starting tackle in the NFL?
Yeah, so of course I think work well in space. I think things to improve on in terms of pad level. I'm not going to be able to get away with high pad level like I was in college, because these guys, they emphasize that. So focusing on that, cleaning up my footwork a little bit, sending more back instead of out, because that was kind of my thing in college, because my feet I could just mirror the guy, and my coach is telling me now, he's just like, just don't do that, just make more decisive footwork, set straight back, which is what I'm working on now, so those are things I could use to improve. You're
going to have a pretty good guy to go up against in practice in Khalil Mack. That's going to help you get better quick, right?
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to what's ahead. Wherever I'm put at, right or left, looking to compete my ass off and really make a name for myself on the team.
You can use some of those MMA moves on Khalil. I know you did some work in the offseason, right, at Boss MMA?
Yeah, Boss MMA, Sacramento. Shout out. That's something I use too, and I've been training pretty recently in the off season, and I look to use, flash your hands, or get that extra punch off, coming from the hip. I think that could help. Yeah.
Are you a big MMA fan or UFC fan, or?
We don't get a whole lot of time in college.
That's true.
To be honest.
That's a good answer. That's good. Studying.
Yeah,
right?
Well, and we don't pay for cable.
That's right.
There you go.
All we pay for is internet. So it's just mostly like Netflix. I watch The Office a lot. Not in MMA, but Office.
Okay, that's good.
Solid. Yeah. Cool. Hey, well, Colton, we really appreciate you joining us, and best of luck at here this first rookie minicamp, and we'll be watching you all year.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, welcome, man.
All right, thanks a lot to Kolton Miller. We appreciate him joining the show. That's part of our plan, right, Vic? We want to get some guys on the show. Well, we're not going to do it every week, but every once in a while we'll get some players on the show. So anybody, you got anybody you'd like us to hear from? We can't promise you anything, but we'll try to get some guys on, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun part of the show. I think we'll get some players on and kind of just chew fat a little bit and see what's going on.
All right, it's time for State of the Nation Mail. We're going to head over to Twitter. You guys can ask us questions each show at #SOTNMail, and we'll start with Matt Lucas. And Vic, is Seth Roberts still being shopped?
Yeah, I think that's still fluid. I think, obviously, you look at the roster, he probably doesn't have a spot right now, but he'll definitely compete, and I think we mentioned with Bowman's plan earlier about waiting for a team to have a need. I could see you wait till training camp, and if a team has a need of injury, I think injury or has a need pop up, I think you probably can move Seth. I know the good thing for them is they've already paid $2 million of his $4 million salary. I think that makes it easier to move him. I think Seth has got a decent track record. I know he wasn't great last year, a lot of drops. It actually wasn't good last year. I'll go stronger than that. But it's good run blocker. He's a good guy. I think he had some moments in the past 3 years where he saw some highlights. So I think if a team is in need of a receiver, I don't think that'll be too much to ask for, like a late-round pick for him.
There you go. All right, next question is from Kyle Herman. He's got a list for us. He wants us to, out of all these guys, to pick who has the best chance to make the 53-man roster. So I'm going to read off all of our names. We got Connor Cook.
Okay.
We got Jalen Ware.
Yep.
Shalom Luani.
Yep.
Johnny Holton.
Okay.
Barrow Brown. Vidal Alexander. And David Sharp. Who are you picking? I think that's 7 names. Who's your guy that has the best chance to make that roster?
You can go first.
I think I'm going to go Connor Cook. Maybe. I mean, if they keep 3 quarterbacks, I don't see Josh Johnson making this team.
You didn't see that website thing with him and Marshawn doing the schedule of countdown and like planning their trips and everything?
Yeah.
Right, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
that's not a bad pick.
Yeah, I'm going to go Connor Cook.
I will go with Sharp, just because I think he's got the size you want. Yeah. I think you can kind of he's a fun toy for Cable to have. You don't need him to play right away. You can try on both spots. Not a lot of depth to that anyway, so I think you can definitely make it. I think as your last tackle.
And we're talking, I mean, both guys that we're picking are former 4th-round picks. So, yeah. I mean, those are the guys that are the most invested in. I mean, Luani, 7th-rounder, Alexander, 7th-rounder, those are all later-round picks. And
last year's staff, they loved Luani, and I thought he definitely flashed in the preseason. I talk about the ball-hawking skills. But damn, he actually got to play during the season. He looked like he was lost at times. He didn't know where he was going. Kind of like it wasn't a good look. So I imagine when this staff looked at that tape from last year, I think that's a big question mark. So he's a guy who has to make a good impression pretty quickly here for him. I think it's important.
Yep. All right, next question is from Nate. He says, hey, guys, what are the chances that the Raiders' defensive talent isn't as bad as we think, and it's just that Jack Del Rio's staff couldn't teach and scheme well?
I guarantee you that's what Reggie says a lot. Reggie's like, you know what? Talking about all these picks I made, they're great picks. But Jack couldn't coach them up.
Even though I traded one of those at Jihad Ward.
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't his call. But I think that's definitely the hope for both Gruden and for Reggie, that some of these guys, the last 3 years' picks, are better than they've showed. And for whatever reason, didn't click with the old staff. I think that's it's possible. You never know how these guys fit in. But they definitely hope so. I mean, I know Gruden wants some of these guys to be able to contribute, and they need some to if they want to get back on the winning side of the ledger.
Well, I mean, the way Gruden's signing all these guys, I don't know how much of Reggie's draft picks are going to play.
No, definitely not. I mean, it's definitely.
I mean, you got Mario Edwards, Eddie Vanderdoes. Those are kind of a couple of the guys they're going to rely on. But outside of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, even like a guy like Obi last year, 2nd-round pick, he's going to have a hard time. But it's definitely going to be a lot of competition, and I think they want him to prove that he deserves a spot on this roster. I mean, he's definitely a guy who I hope is not comfortable at all for being a 2nd-round pick, because I think this new staff is definitely targeting him as a guy they want to seal out of quickly, and they brought a lot of guys in to take his spot. So I just think that's why I think Gruden's done this. He's brought so many veterans in, not only to mold the young guys, teach them how to win, teach them how to be NFL players, but also to push them. And if these guys aren't ready to make the next step, they're going to be out of a job.
Definitely. All right, next question is from C.J. Baldwin. He says, so is it time to panic about this offseason, bringing in decrepit Derek Johnson to somehow be the middle linebacker?
That has to be yesterday's question. I'm not sure that after they signed him. Well, I guess he didn't sign him. They signed him.
Yeah, it was 5 hours ago.
5 hours ago, man. I thought we were back on the positive Derek Johnson train. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I can see why I'll say this. I can see why there's panic. I think if you looked at these free agent moves, some of them are questionable. A lot of guys are older. Not a lot of guys really flashed anything recently. I think the draft, definitely a lot of question marks. You reach for some guys. So I definitely understand why there's a little bit of panic, but give a guy a chance to coach his team. Give a guy a chance to make his own impression on these guys. And I know Gruden has got confidence in his staff's ability to mold these guys. So let's see what he can do. But I can definitely see why there's question marks so far.
Yep. All right, well, that'll wrap up this week's show. Appreciate everybody listening, and I think this was a good one. I like this one, Vic.
Yeah, it's good. I think everyone's fired up. I think we're enjoying it. I think the people out there are enjoying it, so it's good.
And a reminder, again, we are on Apple Podcasts now, so head over there, give us a 5-star rating, give us a review. A lot of you guys have been hooking us up. We appreciate it, and we're on Google Play, we're on Stitcher. You're going to have to wait about a month or so for Spotify. I guess they're doing some updating, and they're not taking any new shows right now, but we're gonna take care of you. We're gonna get you guys. Podcast will be anywhere you need it to be. So keep looking out for it, and we'll tell you when it gets up on there. But again, another reminder too that if you guys want to try out The Athletic, check out all of Vic's Raiders content. You can go to theathletic.com/State of the Nation. You get a 1-week free trial, and then you get 30% off your annual plan, and it's a pretty good deal. So check that out, and we'll be back again sometime soon.
Take care.